Welcome to Tips from Trestle. This podcast is dedicated to discussing the senior living industry with a unique focus on food, hospitality, and leadership. I'm your host, Aaron Fish. As a 25-year veteran of the hospitality industry, I've focused my work on creating exceptional experiences for the customers we serve. My goal for this podcast? Educate, inform, and inspire leaders in senior living to bring food and hospitality to the front of mind in our industry. Let's bring the innovative and passionate spirit of hospitality to everything that we do for the residents, families, guests, and employees we serve each and every day. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. Welcome back to Tips from Trestle. This is our second podcast, part two, if you will, with Margaret Roche. Previously, we were talking about nutrition philosophy and kind of how nutrition is kind of the foundational pieces of it in senior living. And so in this portion of the conversation, we really wanted to kind of get into the nuts and bolts of what is the actual nutritional role, what does dining do, what do the different positions look like? So Maggie, thanks for being back. I want to start by asking you the question that I think we started to get on the last conversation. What is dining's role in a wellness program?
Well, I think dining's role is to take the nutrition leadership. And I think almost all dining programs have access to a dietitian. So it would be in coordination with the dietitian and culinary, of course, but to really get that foundational understanding of what is our nutrition philosophy, what evidence-based eating plan are we using, what are the things, the nutritional bits of it that we really want to emphasize for our residents, all tied into understanding who the resident is or who the client is that you are serving in terms of understanding their unique nutritional needs. If, as you discussed prior, is it a 55-year-old or is it an 85-year-old or all above, and how are we going to do that? And then how is this going to be presented to the resident? Mainly, what's this going to look like on the menu? Are we going to have offerings every day? Are we going to have weekly offerings? Are we going to, I'll go back to the Mind Diet example. The Mind Diet is very specific.
Yeah.
And what I love about the Mind Diet is that they define the Mediterranean diet. We all understand the Mediterranean diet as being a very healthful diet, health promoting, disease preventing. Without a doubt, research backs it up. The problem is, how do you define a Mediterranean diet? It's people think a Mediterranean diet might be pizza and red wine.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah.
The nice thing about the Mind Diet is that they defined the Mediterranean diet for us, and then they added into it, which is what the Mind Diet did.
Yeah.
So you have to figure out how you're going to define it. No, you go ahead.
One of the things, the Mind Diet is such a great example, because one of the reasons when I, as an operator, I was kind of drawn to it is, I don't have that nutritional background, right? I'm not even a classically trained chef, right? I'm the front of the house administrator, operator. But when I looked at the Mind Diet and I looked at kind of that concept of building a philosophy, I looked at the components of, well, how is a chef going to execute this? How is a dining room manager going to explain this? How does a marketing director explain it? And it was well laid out, but it felt like there was a lot of latitude inside of the parameter. The parameters are very specific, but there's a lot of latitude to be creative and kind of say, if you do about this much of this and this much of this, then you have, instead of 3 recipes, you've got 30 recipes that you can use. And it doesn't necessarily limit those different people in their specific roles inside of the department. And so I feel like when you're talking about developing your philosophy, that piece becomes really important.
Right. And that's what everybody uses to execute. And so the Mind Diet's a really good example too, because so I've worked with organizations who are like, well, we want the Mind Diet inspired. We want Mediterranean inspired. I'm like, that's fine, but define it and be very clear. So that meaning 85% of the time we're going to get it we're going to execute this, because it is hard to say, I would rather see that than to say we offer the Mind Diet, but there's no olive oil, or it's a 50-50 olive oil background. There's only berries in season, which two things that are daily components technically of the Mind Diet. But if we say these are the types of food we offer that are consistent with the Mind Diet, or consistent with the Mediterranean diet, or consistent with maybe even DASH. But I know enough to know if I go down south and I don't have biscuits on the menu, which are sodium bombs and not the best sources of saturated fat, that is not, it's not the way people want to live their golden years. Right. So we have to figure out, how do we fit that and meld that in to our menu program? And in my opinion, that needs to be determined in the nutrition philosophy ahead of time. We can't have the culinarians in 50 different communities saying, well, my interpretation of this, of our nutrition program is this, and my interpretation is that. Or even just having a dietitian sitting in an office figuring it out, one person. You really need to take a collaborative approach. Yeah, no, and that's a great segue into kind of the next couple of questions I want to discuss. So let's talk about the role of the dietitian and the role of the chef when you're looking at your nutritional philosophy or your wellness program. Obviously, they're two very different skill sets and training, but they have to go hand in hand. So if we can, let's take a little bit of time and maybe kind of sort out what that looks like with those two positions. Well, I'm a big advocate for the chef or culinary and dining leader / dietitian partnership. There's kind of historically been a little bit of tension there. Yeah. But you can put these two skill sets, as you say, together. It really is like old school synergy, 1 + 1 = 3, because there's so much that we all understand about the job to be done, but the perspective that we bring and the skill set that we bring really can be powerful when you bring it together. So, people have to have respect for each other's position. You have to walk into it understanding this guy is going to teach me something, or this person's going to teach me something. I've got something to learn here. But once you get past that, it's very powerful, very powerful. So I think that the role has to be collaborative, but on the other hand, don't discount the skill, coming from the dietitian perspective of a dietitian. Dietitians have the know-how to set you up with an evidence-based program so that you have to stand on when people, for transparency purposes, when people say to you, talking about wellness, what do you mean Mediterranean? How are you defining it? I look at the ingredients on what you serve, because I looked it up online from your Gordon Food Service and product. What's in this? What are you guys talking about? You want to have a strong foundation of how you're defining your wellness nutritionally. Yeah, as someone who's come from, I guess, the third, or not a third, but maybe like a different angle, right? Because I've worked with chefs, I've worked with dietitians, I've had chefs and dietitians work for me, knowing that one of my jobs was to bring these two together. I clearly can see the synergy that comes from that. What have you seen as some good approaches, good tactics, good ways to approach getting those two positions to actually come together and understanding that it shouldn't be a us versus them, but it's a we kind of need in the operation? Well, you probably can answer this better than I, because I've worked with you in different settings, Aaron, and I know you've always prefaced conversations when we're starting out on something like this. You've always said, "I know enough to know, but this is what I don't know." And I like to take that approach myself, in that when I'm with a dining operations person or a chef, culinarian, there's so much I don't know about making it happen, which is what the operations guys do,
Right.
or making it beautiful and really working with the food and understanding how we're going to pull this off, that people are excited about it. That creativity that people who have their hands in food all day have, that nobody else has. I think if we all take the perspective of, I need what that other person's bringing, I just think it's very powerful. And, I don't know if it's as big of a challenge in terms of when you have a conflict, as much as, because I've done this in other settings where we're, doing group conversations and panel discussions. I find there's plenty of folks who are getting along fantastically and working and having success. And they'll put it this way, those people who are successful in this area, it's because of that. It's because they harness that power of that interdisciplinary perspective.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I feel like a lot of my previous successes have been from that. I have a good understanding of what you do, but I know there's more to it, and I need to build that bridge. And I think when I think about like chefs and dietitians working together, I think about kind of, you've got that nutrition philosophy, and then the next step is putting those two individuals, almost like put them in the conference room and say, okay, here's the foundation. Now I need you to start putting the 2x4s up and figuring out what that looks like. How do we do like a pureed program, right? Like there's ITSE standards that have to be met that you need to follow, right? To make sure you're doing it the right way. The chef doesn't likely know that unless they've been been very dedicated in learning about it. So the dietitian has to bring that knowledge. But the chef's responsibility is, well, I can't just put it, 3 plops of food on a plate and serve it, because that's just not going to work. So, it's that understanding of, I can bring you this, I'm going to bring this to the table, and how do we make all of this work? And I think it's so important, and, it will build a successful program if everybody has that approach. So I think you're right on the money with that.
And you can't do it without it. You really can't.
Yeah.
You can't be successful without it. You just can't.
I know in some of the corporate settings I've been in, I've sometimes struggled a little bit by not having one or the other, because there's been a priority placed on, and that's kind of the nature of being in a corporate leadership role. You only get X amount of dollars and resources. So it's, do I get a chef? Do I get a dietitian? Like, how do I manage those two pieces? And you have to find a way to do both. I don't think, like you said, you can't do it with one or the other. You have to have the two working in tandem. So,
and they can work in tandem, and they can work sequentially too. So it doesn't have to turn into this big, huge, 8 million meeting project. The dietitian does her part, the chef does her part. You come together and say, now let's make it happen. People need to be prepared and really bring to the table their best, and then, knit it up so that it makes sense, and start with who are we as an organization? What are our missions, our value? Who do we serve? Have a good, deep understanding of that too.
Absolutely. So I want to steer in a slightly different direction. I'm curious as to your thoughts. So, we talked about, a whole person approach. We've talked about being collaborative with the people working in the department, the dietitians, the chefs. How do you do things like choice? Like, how do you get choice into your nutrition program?
That's one of the biggest questions or statements I get about why they can't do it. Our people don't want it. If I put fried chicken on the menu up against a salmon, whatever, that fried chicken is going to sell out. Well, yeah, people love fried chicken, and we don't want to be in a position where we're saying to someone literally for the rest of their life, you're not getting fried chicken.
Right.
We have to have an understanding and a respect for our residents, in that everyone wants to feel better. It's a fact that eating well makes you feel better, period. People have, have to manage their expectations in terms of what nutrition can do if you have a chronic disease, et cetera. It's not going to cure you necessarily in many cases, particularly for the older adult who's had a chronic condition for 40 some years. It can make you feel better though. And
Right.
so I wanted to just say that because we have to have a good understanding of the role of nutrition. And I think sometimes people discount the older adults in that they don't want that or they can't learn anything new. And
Right.
I'm always surprised because I have to say I've had that bias. But I'm surprised at the level of understanding that many older adults have about nutrition because it's out there in the world. It's been
Right.
out there in the world since the 70s, in terms of wellness and their willingness to try new things. So it's meeting them where they're at and taking an educational approach. There has to be, by the way, that's nutrition. You're back to nutrition philosophy. Your nutrition philosophy has to include an educational component. How are we going to connect with our residents about this? And how are we going to help them understand, and get their input on what we're trying to do so that when we build this, it's meaningful to them.
Yeah. And I think one of the things you mentioned early was, you talked about the comparison of the fried chicken and the salmon.
Mm-hmm.
And as an operator, I 1000% agree that fried chicken is probably going out the door. But if you're thinking about, this is my perspective at least, if you're thinking about that whole person wellness, sometimes you need to have that soul satisfying meal to meet that wellness need, right? So I eat salmon on a regular basis, but I also every once in a while have a, fried chicken binge too. And it's really that like, you know what, like I've eaten the salmon, I've eaten healthy this week. I just need that just to feel good. Is that back to my roots or back to whatever, or that whatever that need is. I think choice fits in that way. And I think there's a way operationally, if you're smart about how you prepare food, how you manage your kitchens, that you can actually increase choice as opposed to reduce it as you're preparing menus and creating them.
That is so well said. So that's a really good example of that would be part of our nutrition philosophy is soul satisfaction, because of our encompassing wellness program includes, this is how it's not just straight up nutrition, it's that soul satisfying food. I love that. That's great, Aaron.
I'm going to coin that.
That's really good. Yeah, you should, because that's part of it. That's an important part of it, and we would weave that in.
Yeah.
But people can tell your BS meter. People have BS meters. They're going to know when we do a Mediterranean diet here, and the only fish on the menu that week was beer battered whatever and fries.
Yeah.
That obvious. We have to have, and so another example, I guess, is the plant-based stuff and the vegetarian. Back in the day, we did have a can of beans back there for the 2 vegetarians you get in 5 years. But now it's different.
Absolutely.
The thing is here to stay, and it can't be just, well, I put the Beyond Burger on the menu as an always available so that the vegetarians can eat Beyond Burgers every day, as far as I'm concerned. So that's not it. That's just not the solution.
No, I agree. It's funny you say that, because I remember many, many years ago being asked about how are you going to, I need a vegetarian diet. How are you going to meet that? And we literally, because we didn't have a good nutrition philosophy, because we hadn't really thought it through, we turned an entree option into a vegetable plate. And it was literally just, we offered 4 vegetables of the day, pick 3 of them, and that can be your meal. Mm-hmm. And it had no thinking behind it, no thought about, they need the protein needs of a vegetarian, all the different aspects like that. It was just, you need vegetables, here's vegetables. And so I think it speaks to, you gotta evolve and think about all of these things.
And I guarantee you that organization had access to a dietitian, and so a lot of this saves you trouble. Sitting your nutrition philosophy up front saves you trouble, because that dietitian would have said, hey, you need protein. This is the greatest risk for these people. And there's something else back there. Well, we could do eggs, we could do cheese if it's, lacto-ovo vegetarian. Let's get some other sources of protein that we could have 5 or 6 or 7 entrees ready to go, a block of tofu, whatever.
Right.
There's ways to do it, to figure it out ahead of time. So you're not letting, and that's the other thing with this, the whole turnover and all of that. We can't leave it to the operator at the moment of, on his feet or her feet, to have to decide right then and there what the solution is. It's not fair to them.
Right.
We have to give them the tools they need to execute.
Yeah. And I think about some of the smaller operators who, want to invest or need the investment and the resources. And I think sometimes they just don't know where to get it. And there's a lot of ways to get that support and get that done without having to bring on a full-time dietitian or to have to hire this huge staff. So I think it's important to know that, like you said, it doesn't have to be 800 hours of work to get it done and put it in place. If you're thoughtful and you're smart about it, you can get to it. So we're almost out of time here on the second one. And I wanted to ask you.
I do believe it.
I know, right? We could probably do a third or a fourth one of these. But I wanted to ask you, what's not wellness, right? We've been talking about what is wellness, what is the nutrition philosophy, how does everybody do it? What's not wellness? Like what do you see that as? Well,
I think it's important that we don't cross the line to medical nutrition therapy, but everyone, so by medical nutrition therapy, I mean diabetes, like a diet for people with diabetes or low cholesterol, etc. However, all of what we talked about in terms of nutrition philosophy, if you get into an evidence-based wellness preventative health program, it helps those with diabetes and hypertension and kidney disease and etc.
Right.
So it's important that you draw the line for folks, and that you don't get yourself in a position where your 18-year-old server is giving medical nutrition therapy advice to your resident who has diabetes.
Yeah.
Not the food plan. And back to that choice thing, that we're letting the residents know this is what's healthy, but eat whatever you want.
Yeah, that's a great point. That made me think of, the line that I see that kind of has to be drawn almost between a skilled nursing setting and everything that comes before that. Because I've been in assisted living communities where sometimes there's an expectation that we're going to manage the diet. We're going to give you all of that medical intervention through nutrition. And I would always want to push back and say, no, this is, you're in assisted living, you're in independent living, you're still in control. You're still the one making the choices and the decisions, and so I need to give you the ability to do the diet, to manage it. But at the end of the day, you need to be the one managing it, because it's you're the person experiencing it. So if you want to eat healthy, I need to have those options. But if you want fried chicken and mashed potatoes and gravy every day, I need to kind of be able to meet that need too, and let you choose that path.
Right. But that just underscores the need for education. And I do think there is a greater role for the dietitian in assisted living. Now, of course, in skilled nursing, the dietitian's there. And I do think the role for wellness in the regular menu for long-term care. For example, things like, why don't we just put oatmeal on the menu? The difference between the nutritional value of oatmeal and cream of wheat is phenomenal. So do we have to have cream of wheat every other day? Those kinds of decisions can be made from a wellness perspective. It'll feed into your skilled nursing program once you develop your overall overarching wellness program, if perhaps you're like a CCRC. Back to the medical nutrition therapy component, I do think there's a role for dietitians to come in and provide that education to individuals so they can self-select in the dining room. And there's a real need for that, and I think it's underused in the industry.
I would agree.
And there's opportunities for reimbursement on that too, for those with diabetes in particular. So through insurance. And I'm sure there's plenty of people with self-pay too. So I think there's a role for tapping into that.
Awesome. So any last thoughts, anything that you feel we need to emphasize or put a point or two on before we wrap up this second discussion?
Well, I think you're better off, downplaying the wellness nutrition thing if you're not going to do it right. Because I think you can cause more trouble by doing it wrong. And not, by doing it wrong, I mean not having a cohesive program that's been, worked through your entire team, nutrition, dining. I mean, your dining leaders, your chefs, your dietitians, and have it evidence-based. You can get yourself into a lot of trouble by just making this stuff up by what we all know is healthy. I think it could backfire on you. And it's not that complicated once you get the people with the know-how together. You can really put together some beautiful programs that are unique to you. I see it as wellness is an opportunity to differentiate and to really deliver on what you identify as your values and your goals for your organization. It's a wonderful opportunity to really express yourself about who you are and how you see taking care of older adults and serving them, since nutrition is such a big part of it. And wellness, of course, is what it's all about.
Yeah, no, that's all great stuff. So, Maggie, you want to tell our listeners, how can they reach out to you? How can they find all the great information that you share all the time?
People can reach me through our website, rochedietitians.com. Another way I communicate with a lot of folks is in LinkedIn, and I'm under Margaret Roche, R-O-C-H-E, on LinkedIn, or Roche Dietitians is where our website is, or you can look us up and call our office. We're there. We answer the phone. Live people answer our phone every day. So give us a call. We'll have a conversation.
Great. Well, Maggie, I've loved these last two conversations. It's always fun to chat with you. I'm sure we'll do it again in the future. So I appreciate your time and joining me here on Tips from Trestle.
Thanks, Aaron. Fun being with you.
So there you have it, another one in the books. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. You can follow or direct message me on LinkedIn, where I'm always commenting and posting about food, hospitality, and leadership for the senior living industry. Or give me a follow on Twitter at AHFish or Instagram at AaronHFish. And check out my company, Trestle Hospitality Concepts, at www.trestlehospitalityconcepts.com. I'm your host, Aaron Fish, and this has been another episode of Tips from Trestle.